Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast, brought to you by the Beyond Compulsion Academy. In this video, we're going to be talking about transcription factors, delta FOSS-B, CREB, reward prediction error, dopamine, my old approach of trying to overcome pornography addiction, my new approach of actually changing my brain for good, and lots more. So I hope this episode is going to be useful to you. Now let's start off with my porn addiction in the past. I'm 12 years old, I'm on holiday in Greece, and there's some older guys that are talking about porn and masturbation. And I get a bit intrigued, I go back to my hotel room and I think I start Googling one or two things. And then a few months go by and I've gone from searching up boobs on Google Images to watching things like Babe Station on TV. Anyone from UK listening probably knows what I'm on about. It's just like naked women on TV after 10 o'clock at night. And we'd have like sleepovers with my friends. I remember, and we'd like turn Babe Station on and it'd be like super exciting. I remember as well like watching even music videos would just like do it for me when I was younger. Like growing up, like on my way to school, not even on my way to school, like before even going off to school, I remember like eating my cereal and I'd be like getting all horny, like watching music videos, and I'd just be like watching one music video after another, and sometimes I'd even just like then and there like masturbate, and it was pretty crazy. And then I'd come home from school and I'd just be thinking about masturbating again, and like think about certain photos and videos and get into actual porn sites. And this porn addiction just went on, and I kind of got into more sexual content. So that was like starting off at age 12, which is so young. Like I think about 12-year-olds nowadays and I'm like, oh my God, like you should not have the opportunity to look at this kind of content, especially without knowing any of the consequences anyway. So yeah, it all started off very young, but it wasn't until I was probably around 16 that this problem hit me, and it was due to erectile dysfunction with my first girlfriend. We went to have sex and my dick just didn't work. So then I go online and I'm like, what has happened? Like I couldn't comprehend that my penis wouldn't work for this girl who was like really attractive to me back then. So go online, discover NoFap and start trying to stop this behaviour, but I wasn't really taking it too seriously. And I remember that same girlfriend, we were a bit older by this point, she went on holiday and she went to Bournemouth to see her grandma. And I remember just during that week, I was just there like masturbating. Like I kind of had this junky thought, which is like an excuse to engage. I had this junky thought of, she's gone on holiday now, so it's okay for me to engage. Like I've got this great opportunity. And I remember I was living at my parents' at the time. I was in the attic and I was trying to do some coding for my business. And I was just there like masturbating, looking at porn like all week really, like 3 or 4 times every day for prolonged periods of time, looking at more and more sexual content. And I was in quite a bad place mentally, but I also didn't really seem to care about anything. So she returns from the holiday, she wants to see me, and I'm just like, can I be bothered? I wasn't really that arsed. Eventually I succumb and I decide, let's go see her. So we go down to the local park, literally right outside my house. We're walking around and I'm just there like a zombie, not really paying any interest in her. Don't ask her how her holiday is or how her holiday was or anything like that at all. I just don't really care. Anyway, a few weeks go by and I remember thinking like, this relationship's definitely going to come to an end soon. And I didn't really do anything about it other than going to the pub and like have a few beers and tell my friend about it. And I was just like, I think she's probably going to break up with me soon. Like I just can't really see this lasting. But bearing in mind, this was like the love of my life back then. But the porn addiction had hit me so hard that I just didn't really seem to care about my own relationship. So the day comes and lo and behold, she says, I want to end this relationship. And I didn't like put up a fight or anything. I was kind of just passively like, yeah, definitely. I think I even told my friends, I was like, yeah, it was a mutual decision. And in my head, it kind of felt like a mutual decision. It wasn't, but it felt like it was because I was just like so apathetic around the whole relationship. I just completely let it die out just because I honestly didn't care back then. And I went to see my friend, a different friend of mine, and we were playing like FIFA on the PlayStation, and I'd just be like laughing and joking about it and just really not giving a shit that this girl had just broken up with me. I just didn't care, and it was just kind of more like, what about all these other girls now? Like, I'm so excited to be single. And, I think I probably messaged the guys like, I'm single, guys, like, let's go. So it was a bad place, and it took a few months for that breakup to actually settle in and for me to realise like, wait, hang on, actually, that was all due to porn. and, well, my actions due to porn, and actually, like, there's a problem here. So I ended up going on holiday to Portugal for a few weeks, and that was at the start of 2020, January 2020. And I get into self-improvement, and I'm reading these books all the time. I start working out, and I'm like, right, actually, I'm gonna stop porn. I'm gonna stop this behaviour. And I start trying loads of different things. So what I'm gonna do now is talk a little bit about my old approach towards overcoming porn addiction, and then throughout the video, you'll get to understand my new approach as well. So yeah, my old approach was like meditation. Meditation did definitely work to some extent in terms of helping me deal with some discomfort day in, day out. I was journaling every day. I used to have this rule in my head, which was I have to create 6 goals every day. So I'd write down these 6 goals, and I'd just go on a mission to try complete these 6 goals. And I had a bit of a problem with the journaling at first, because I remember I was always writing down, like, don't go on Instagram, like, don't go on Twitter, like, don't do this, don't do that. And, I'd have all these different conditions and restrictions in my life. So I'd be trying not to do all these things. And I remember always just like putting a cross every time I tried not to do something. I'd always end up doing it. And that's partly due to deprivation, which I'm sure we'll get into in a different video. But then eventually I shifted that habit and started actually writing, like, okay, let's focus on what I do want to do in life. And I really like the quote. It's not really a quote, but just like this concept of not having any dead goals. So like NoFap, like not doing something is a dead goal. Like we're focusing on not doing something. Instead, what we can always do is choose to focus on what we actually are doing. So what am I choosing to do and why? I was also working out a lot and started doing all these push-ups. I remember coming back to England after many months in Portugal. My friends were like, oh, wow, like you're in good shape now. And they were all like really surprised. And that was quite nice, I guess, because I hadn't even noticed, because I was like doing these push-ups every day, just like one day at a time. I hadn't really noticed any of these changes in myself. But then because I'd gone 9 months without seeing my friends, when I came back, they were like, oh, you look like a different guy now. So I was doing quite well in life, found some purpose. I was working on this business I really loved back then. And I spent quite a lot of time with some friends. I was living in the mountains up in this place called Montchique and made these amazing friends. And I was reading these books every day, as I say. And I came back to England, and I was in therapy as well. And the thing is, right, I was doing all these things, and I'd learned loads about myself, internal family systems, cognitive behavioural therapy, doing all these different meditations and all this shit. But the truth is, I was still relapsing. I was still looking at porn, despite my self-improvement habits being on point. I was still looking at porn. And don't get me wrong, I was looking at porn less frequently. Instead of 3 or 4 times a day, it was more like maybe once every few weeks or months even, if I got a good streak going. But when I was looking at porn, I would binge and edge. I'd still go down this rabbit hole of looking at more and more sexual content. And so what I want to do next is talk a little bit about reward prediction error, dopamine, and transcription factors to better understand the neuroscience of addiction. And one thing I personally like about understanding the neuroscience is it can kind of help us let go of some of the feelings of shame, or like there's something inherently wrong with us. One of my favorite books I've read is called The Brain That Changes Itself, and it's all about neuroplasticity. And I think understanding that the brain can change and really developing a growth mindset is so crucial to actually get started on changing your brain and rewiring it so that you don't have to succumb to a life of porn addiction or any other addiction as well. So reward prediction error is a really interesting concept. I will explain it through an analogy. So imagine you have this apple tree and you pick out an apple and you eat an apple for the very first time. Now, before eating that apple, you probably didn't have much of an expectation, and then you bite into it and it's really sweet. It tastes good. It's better than you expected. So what you then have is positive reward prediction error. The reality of the reward is better than the expectation, and that creates this positive reward prediction error, which basically conditions or trains the brain to learn that, okay, apples are good, I like apples now. So your prediction becomes updated, so that expectation of the reward increases, which means that when you actually have the reality of the reward and you have the apple, there isn't going to be reward prediction error in the future, because you've already had the apple and now your brain's changed. It's predicted that, okay, apples are good, your prediction's been updated, so there's no reward prediction error the second time you have the apple. So positive reward prediction error can really help our brain learn to seek certain things, and that's how our brains evolved essentially. And it's kind of there to keep things in check as well, because of how the reward prediction error leads to the predictions being updated around the consumption of different things. What that then means is that we don't continue having the same reward prediction error every single time. So you think about maybe like something like a slice of pizza as well. You know, you have that first slice and it's like, oh wow, like, this is a great pizza slice. But then if every single slice you thereon had was like quite as exciting or as great, you know, you might just continue eating that pizza like indefinitely. Now, obviously, there's junk food and super normal like stimuli as well, and these definitely hit the brain differently and to different extents as well. You know, a really ultra processed pizza may hit the brain differently, but when you learn how to take control of the mind and you know how to deal with any desire at all of this stuff around, you know, super normal stimuli or how much dopamine is released through consuming different things, it's not even really going to matter much. But for now, the premise is, okay, there's positive reward prediction error when you consume something and it's better than you expect it to be. So we eat an apple and the prediction is updated. This helps us learn so that we don't end up eating a million different apples or just a million apples, right? But the difference is, when it comes to pornography, is that we look at porn and there's an abundance of videos. I mean, you could literally scroll and watch videos all day long. I mean, even just like scrolling on a porn site or the anticipation, that excitement of possibly watching porn is enough to really get that dopamine release, because dopamine is all about more. It's all about this anticipation of a future reward as such. We call it a reward. Obviously, when you're in an addiction, you don't even enjoy it that much, which we'll get onto in a little bit later in this video. So what happens is, right, we got this like abundance of videos. There's no real expectation. You watch that first video and it's usually gonna be better than expected. Like the first time you watch porn, if you think back, you would have been so excited to watch that content. Really, really high positive reward prediction error. Your brain has learned that porn feels good to watch. So your prediction is updated. And then what happens though? And this is where it's really different to just consuming normal things that are actually natural. Is that you watch that second video, you're still going to have a high positive reward prediction error. Because the expectation and the reality of it is still going to be so different. You don't know what you're getting into. Like, you click on a video, you don't know what you're going to watch. And even if that video isn't that stimulating, you click off that video, you can go search and find another one. And it's that anticipation of seeing that next video and not knowing what's coming next, which is where this reward prediction error comes in, which is where the dopamine is released and it's activated. And then we end up down the rabbit hole of looking at more and more progressively novel sexual content, to the point where eventually we finish and we go, Jesus Christ, what have I just done to myself again? How did I end up here? Now, in terms of the science and all of this, you can learn a lot more by going to a post online called General Consequences of Dopamine Prediction Error Signaling. If you type that in Google, you'll find out more about Wolfram Schultz and his work at the University of Cambridge. But what I'll next talk about is how a lot of this stuff that I'm talking about is really to do with like drugs, and you know, there's a lot more research on this stuff when it comes to drugs, like especially the transcription factors, which we'll talk about shortly. But there's actually studies as well, again at the University of Cambridge by Voon et al., which basically showed that the impact of porn on the brain is very, very similar to the impact of cocaine. And so what I just want to suggest, and you know, I haven't read for hours. No, you know what I have? I've read for hours and hours on this. That's all I've done this week, to be honest with you. You know, yesterday I was like in a nice coffee shop. I was with my girlfriend, and we sat down, we had a coffee, and I was just like researching all of this stuff. So I have actually read for hours, but I'm not a neuroscientist. That's what I was going to say. I'm not a neuroscientist, but basically what I have discovered from my own personal research is that the impact of porn on the brain is very, very similar to the impact of drugs on the brain. And you can go and research more on that if you would like. But next, what I think we should talk about is dopamine, the molecule of more. I actually think The Molecule of More is one of my favourite books on neuroscience. It's a really great book. Highly recommend it. I'm not affiliated in any way, but I have actually spoke to the author as well, Daniel Z. Lieberman. And when we had a chat, we were talking about porn addiction. And he actually said, the role of dopamine is to maximize future resources in such a way that it meets the needs of our genes. And that is survival and reproduction. Let's think about porn and orgasming. Okay, well, that is all to do with that reproduction. It's about having more genes in the future. And so our brain wires to really crave it. And again, that's why looking at pornography has a very similar impact on the brain as consuming drugs. So what happens is we have these transcription factors. Now, we have something called CREB, which is a protein that regulates the expression of specific genes. And what happens when it comes to drug addiction anyway, and people have found that it has a very similar impact on our brain when we consume porn, is that essentially what happens is our brain stops releasing as much dopamine when we're consuming porn, and it dampens the reward circuitry. Now, this is why people experience what's called anhedonia, where people are actually enjoying their life less because they've consumed so much porn. CREB is going to impact your brain, and it's going to make other things, like ordinary things, seem very grey and boring, and you're always going to want that extra stimulation. So what happens over time is when your brain becomes addicted to porn is you actually enjoy watching porn a lot less than you used to because of how the brain's changed. And then what also happens, though, is, let's say you actually try and stop this behaviour, something called delta phos-B can really get in the way, or try and get in the way anyway, because what this is it's another transcription factor. So transcription factors change our genes, and whereas CREB, the levels of CREB, they dissipate, they go away quickly. Me trying to read out these words is not very effective, but basically, yeah, CREB will go away. But then what happens is delta phos-B will stay in the brain for weeks and months. Delta phos-B leads to this intense craving, sensitization. You're always going to be thinking about wanting porn. You're going to be so sensitive to triggers, and you're going to be really vulnerable to getting addicted, essentially, due to this rewiring of the brain. This is what happened to me, and so it became really hard for me to stop engaging in porn. What I want to do is just zoom out a bit. Let's actually look at this from a big picture. We've got reward prediction error, we've got dopamine, we've got these transcription factors. The brain changes when we consume porn. That's the key thing I want to get across. And for me personally, it ruined my brain. As I say, with that girlfriend when I was younger, I just didn't really care when she broke up with me. And I think that's largely due to being in a porn addiction and just being so desensitized to the reality of the world, and meanwhile being so sensitized to the possibility of consuming pornography. I was 12 years old when I got into porn. The average age at which children first saw pornography was just 13 years old. That's by the Children's Commissioners in 2023. 13 years old. We're living in a porn epidemic, and this is a massive problem, and people are struggling. People are really struggling, and they're trying to get support and help for this problem. They're trying to overcome it. But I really think most people, and myself included in the past, for 9 years, are going down the same old route, and that route is not working, it's not effective, and it's just making things worse. So if you type in, how do you overcome porn, you're probably going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole. Eventually you may end up at NoFap. This is the biggest community, and actually I'm not talking about NoFap specifically here, I'm more talking about Reddit and NoFap communities. Now, I had a look online, and I found one of the biggest, most popular posts on NoFap was by someone who, I think they were called Must Stop Fapping, and they had this big list of tips and tricks. On that list, they had things like working out, doing yoga, grooming yourself, going for a walk, hanging out with people, reading a book, joining a club, cleaning the house or apartment, start a chore, learn something new. I kind of tried all of those things myself. It's very similar to my old approach towards overcoming this problem. And they also wrote about avoidance techniques. So, deleting your porn folder, installing a porn blocker, stay in public places, stay off the computer or phone, except for a dedicated task. So I kind of went down that route myself, trying to do all those things. And I actually got to 90 days of NoFap. I think during that time I was doing a lot of meditation as well, which helped a bit. But yeah, I managed to get there. I managed to get to this glorious place. Wow, 90 days, amazing, right? I then relapsed, not long after, because my brain was addicted and I'd just been avoiding, substituting, distracting myself, trying to get by day, always thinking about this problem still, but just never really dealing with it directly and just managing to avoid it temporarily. So I ended up relapsing, staying in the addiction for another few years until eventually I meet Mary Paulus and learn the Beyond Compulsion method. So what I think is so key to realise, and I really hope this helps you, is that dopamine and the amount of dopamine released when we're consuming porn is so much higher than other activities. So, that post is on about like working out, reading a book, cleaning your house, starting a chore. None of those things can compete with porn. Like, porn in your brain is now this number one thing. It's your like number one priority on some level to get to porn. And so then what happens is you have so many what we call junky thoughts. So these are excuses, rationalizations, justifications to engage with porn. Like, your brain wants this porn so bad, right? So when I was talking to Daniel Z. Lieberman, he said this as well. He said, so dopamine's job is to make us always look ahead. It is very, very powerful. One of the things it does, as you pointed out, is that it generates spontaneous thoughts. Sometimes these spontaneous thoughts are incredibly valuable. We talk about insights into problems that we were unable to figure out. That's great. So, you're in the shower, you've had a long day at work, and next thing you know, this solution to a problem just comes to you. Spontaneous thoughts. But spontaneous thoughts can also be extremely damaging. These thoughts that justify these behaviours. It's not that dopamine is evil. It's because dopamine is neutral and it's just doing its job of maximizing future resources. What I would do personally is probably swap out the word dopamine there for the addicted part of the mind. Essentially, the addicted part of your mind has one job. It wants you to look at pornography. And so we've worked with around 40 clients now in our first year of working on porn addiction recovery. And our clients have had so many thoughts which are related to engaging with porn. So let's just have a look at a few examples. I'm too busy. It's not really porn. So that's in relation to maybe being online and having a look at some Instagram models or some shit. One peek won't hurt. I need to release. Porn will help me sleep. I can keep getting away with it. This will be the last time. Freedom can wait till tomorrow. I'll surely fail after 3 weeks again. I have to release. It's a biological process. Never ever masturbating can't be healthy. It's not me. It's the delta phos B. I'm helpless. There's just an abundance of thoughts that are going to come up when you're trying to overcome porn addiction. These are taken from my clients and my own experience as well in the past. So you're going to have thoughts, spontaneous thoughts, which are going to try and get you to look at porn because your brain values porn basically above anything else because that's how it's wired at this point in time. Fortunately, we don't need to succumb to any of this bullshit. And we can overcome this problem for good. But what I really think is key to understand is that the root cause of porn addiction is addicted neural pathways. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. There's no shame attached here. There's no judgment. This is about addiction. Your brain's wired in a certain way due to the transcription factors, due to how dopamine works, due to how reward prediction error works and all of this stuff. Your brain's addicted and it's ruining your brain. And then what people are doing is they're looking at those symptoms of the porn addiction, which are things like shame and loneliness, sadness, maybe anxiety, erectile dysfunction, low confidence, low self-esteem. They're looking at all these symptoms and they're going, okay, I need to fix that symptom. So then what they're doing, trying to overcome these symptoms is, they're getting into the working out, they're going for walks, they're reading books, doing all these kind of things to improve themselves, which is great. Self-improvement's a brilliant thing and I'm an advocate for it. Go to therapy. Yeah, great, brilliant. But the thing is, right, nothing's actually going to change until you deal with the root cause of this problem. The root cause is these addictive neural pathways. And those can only actually be changed by dealing with this problem directly, dealing with urges. Now, what I have at the moment is a compulsion test, and this is quite interesting because what we're getting feedback from people on how this problem's impacting their life. This is obviously completely private and confidential, and there's basically 10 questions on this compulsion test. I'll leave a link below. The questions are around how this is impacting your life, and the things that we're measuring are things like wasting time, people's focus, whether they're enjoying their life less, whether they're feeling sad, the lack of self-trust that they have, feeling disconnected from the world and other people, missed opportunities in life, impacted self-esteem, feelings of shame, and then this problem of eventually watching it after trying to quit. Now, we've had only around 50 people complete this compulsion test so far. It's been up a few months now. And the two things that people have scored themselves most highly on, the things that people are struggling with the most when they're trying to overcome porn and they've got a bit of a problem or a lot of a problem, is one, enjoying their life less, which had a rating of 8.9 out of 10. That's what people are saying about their experiences. They're enjoying their life a lot less after they've watched porn. And number two is whether they've tried to quit many times but eventually ended up watching it once again. That was a 9 out of 10. Really high scores. And so these guys doing the compulsion test, over 50 guys, they may be into self-improvement. They may have great relationships with their family. A lot of our clients do. May have great careers, successful businesses. Again, a lot of our clients do. So they've got all these things going on in their life, and maybe outwardly they seem like, yeah, they're on top of the world. But inwardly, like what's actually going on in their brain is they're struggling. And the thing is, you could literally be maybe traveling all around the world, have some life that sounds amazing, maybe material success. But if you're struggling with a porn addiction, you don't know how to control yourself. You keep trying to stop this behavior that you keep on doing, you're going to be in a lot of pain. And psychologically, it's not a good place to be. I was there for 9 years. It was horrible. What we need to do is completely shift our approach. We basically need a complete paradigm shift in the way in which we see this problem, our perspective on it. So first of all, what we need to do is redefine the problem. The problem is these addictive neural pathways and this lack of control over our own actions. Once you're in control of your own actions, once you can deal with any urge at any moment, any compulsive desire at all, and you can deal with all of those junky thoughts that we talked about earlier, and you just know that it's bullshit from the addictive part of your mind, you're going to be in a really good place. You're going to be able to overcome this problem for good. So we need to understand how the addictive part of our mind works so we can counter those junky thoughts and unanswerable questions, which we've not really talked about in this particular video, but I have some other content on that if you want to watch it. And then what we do is we just deal with the urges correctly and change the brain for good. What happens in addiction is basically you have an urge and you have a choice. And you have an urge and you have a choice. And when you're having these urges, it does genuinely feel like, this urge is going to be here forever. And I can tell you from my experience, that's not true. You get through that urge, you experience that discomfort, and you do that time and time again. Over time, what's going to happen is your brain does change. Now, as I say, junky thoughts can get in the way. So when you're having these urges, you're going to have thoughts like, oh my God, I need to release. Like, I can't deal with this. This is too difficult. This is too painful. I need to get to sleep. I'm so stressed out. Oh, I'll just look once, all of this shit. That's what's going to happen in your brain because the brain has this priority of the dopamine release from porn. It's wired to want that porn above anything else. But if you deal with those urges and you can go through all of that and get to the other side, you're going to experience peace of mind because permanent mental freedom is absolutely possible. You can overcome this problem for good. You can rewire the brain. Like delta phosphate is there for a few weeks or months, but if you consistently deal with these urges, you think through that desire time and time again, you will overcome this problem for good. And on the other side, you're going to have so much more happiness and self-respect, confidence, joy. And the little things in life are going to be fun again. You're going to have colour in your life. And you're not going to not want to see your girlfriend because you've just been watching porn all week. You'll be there for the people in your life and you'll just have that self-respect and you'll care about things again. That is possible. At the Beyond Compulsion Academy, we teach a 5-fact script, neural pathway rewiring. That's how we do it. So there's a lot of education that goes into understanding the facts that we have on the script. But what we do and what I've done now for over a year is basically anytime I've had that compulsive desire, I've just read through the script. And so it simplifies everything. I don't need to think about what am I going to do because the addictive part of the mind is going to try and get me in all these different directions. You need to have a very, very simple, specific, digestible way of dealing with urges, where every single time you have an urge, you know exactly what you're going to do. Your system for overcoming pornography addiction is way, way more important than the day-by-day results. You could do a NoFap streak like I did in the past for 90 days and not actually rewire the brain at all, because all you've done is avoid it, distract yourself and substitute it for maybe a different compulsive behaviour, because now maybe you're eating way more food or smoking cigarettes or playing video games or scrolling social media, some shit like that. That's not going to rewire the brain correctly. What you need to do is learn how to deal with that temporary discomfort, change those neural pathways correctly, and you will overcome this problem for good. And the other side is just so worth it. Hopefully this shortish podcast has been useful. Hope it's helped you. Feel free to do that compulsion test, link in the description. If you have liked this, then please give it a like and subscribe. And yeah, I really do hope you can overcome this problem for good, because I know it's hard, I know it's difficult, no pun intended. And have an amazing rest of your day. Bye bye.